Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, Omaha Productions Jack Foster. I need to actually do the Omaha when we do the intro, but it's not my natural disposition here, Jack. It's just I'm too late. I'm not a yeller. I'm not an aggressive Omaha. It's not me.
Yeah, it's hard to do it too without completely peaking. Audio wise, it's tough to do a full, out of your chest Omaha without just making it not enjoyable for the listeners at home. So,
no, I've never been a yeller. Never been a really boisterous extroverted person. I have the natural NPR type conversation quality where I'm. It's not me. Asking me to yell or doing that. It's just not
a big speech person.
No,
get in front of the crowd and deliver a invigorating speech.
No, no to all that. My breathing's all messed up because I get super nervous. So I don't remember to breathe. That's one of the things I have to be careful on when I'm doing those intros and stuff. The cold opens can be dangerous for me because I'll just go for 7 minutes and just forget to breathe, and then I'm out of breath at the end of it, where I'm and I'm having to retrain my body to be okay with it, because I just, it's not natural for me. I get nervous and I talk super fast. When it's just me or something, I speed up, and it's just not conducive to great oxygen levels, I guess.
I have a problem. I've always had a problem with talking fast, specifically on radio, because that's kind of when you start letting yourself go a little bit and have some fun, and then you just go in this wormhole in your mind and you're just rolling and talking super fast. So you got to watch yourself with that stuff.
Yeah, because you feel like you're under the I've been there too, right? Doing radio hits, and you're under the time crunch. It's not like podcasts where it's very laid back. Sometimes you have hard closes and stuff like that, but it's very conversational. When you're on the radio, you just feel like you got to get all your points out very quickly, and you're just I gotta get it out before they go to the whatever. Then you're just trying to. It's just all very sped up. Same with TV though. Before commercial break and this and the other. It's never really. I don't know. I don't think I'd be good consistently in either of those two realms, because it's just not me naturally. But maybe you can learn. I don't know.
Well, good thing you're here, right? Doing the podcast.
I started in radio. That's how I learned how to do all my audio stuff, and I'm grateful for that. But seeing it was oh, this is not me. And podcasts were just starting to come around, and the Bill Simmons BS Report at the time, and a lot of other shows that I grew up on were oh, this is more my jam. This is way more me. And it's I think what Cowherd does, no chance. Solo shows, absolutely not. Cowherd can just talk and just keep it going for an hour and 15. I couldn't imagine just doing my own show where there's no guests or anybody to bounce things off of, because I can't just start talking into just nothingness.
It's basically like being a lecturer, right? That's kind of what I compare McElroy to at times, because his show, I produce is himself. And when it's game breakdowns for 55 straight minutes on Thursdays, I'm like, dude, this is like a class. I'm attending a class to learn about every single game and both sides of every single game. And for 55 minutes straight without any other voice. That is what it is. It's pretty much a lecture. It's an enjoyable lecture, but that's what it is.
Yeah. I feel like you have more, among the Tennessee Vols sports guys here, between you, Ryan, Ethan, and myself, I think you're the most likely to be able to handle a solo show and the most comfortable with a lecture type setting.
Yeah, maybe. I've always been pretty good at speaking in front of people and, putting thoughts together that way, I guess. Obviously, Ryan's a writer first. Those guys are writer first. I'm not. So it's a little easier for me, I suppose.
Yeah, you just have this is more of the natural type. I feel like that's more of your bread and butter. I feel like it's kind of why you went to audio and things like that. I think it's more, I don't know. I think it's more natural for you. But we all have our different talents in journalism. We all do different things. Jack Foster, we have some other things we talk about here and on this program, and with baseball 2 weeks away. It's pretty crazy. Valentine's Day will be here before you know it.
15 days. Let's go. 14 days. 2 weeks, from today when this is airing.
Can't wait. And the title defense is on, and we'll get into some Tennessee baseball stuff, but we'll be taping these on Thursday nights during the season, so we can get some fun Tennessee baseball weekly content here for you guys. But we also have best bets, because there will always be some Tennessee football, basketball, things like that we can talk about in terms of future bets and all that kind of stuff. And I want to throw this one out to you first here, because Tennessee football does drive everything here in Knoxville. Jack Foster, over under 2 Vols starters on the offensive line will be LRB guys, like in-house recruits this season. Are you buying or selling that in 25?
Yeah, I love how you picked 2, because that is probably the number that's going to happen, right? So if I had to say an over or an under, I would lean under, because that would mean that Carrick is back. I think that's the most likely scenario in which 2 LRB guys don't start along the offensive line. But, as it stands right now, it doesn't seem like that is going to be a reality with Carrick coming back. Obviously, the eligibility is in question here. So I think the number is 2. But like you said, if you're going to make me pick, I guess I'd go under. But I do think the number's 2, probably looking at, obviously, David Sanders, 5-star freshman coming in. And, the center position looks like Satterwhite is probably in position to start there. You got Hurd and the 2 transfers, and Pendleton and Moe, new transfers, I should say. Hurd, obviously, transfer from last year, that seem to be likely starters along the offensive line as well. So 2's the number, but if you had to make me pick, I'd say under, because of the potential of Andre Carrick coming back.
It is weird we still haven't heard 100% like what's happened with Carrick. I mean, like, if he's still appealing, like, he has to be in school right now, because the ad drops over. Like, I think that would mean he has to be in class. Like, I don't, it's a weird spot to be in, right? Like, I don't know, like, it's being so up in the air with him, but it is, like, the Sam Pendleton edition, I think, makes it interesting, because he has the center background at Notre Dame. He can play guard, he can move around, he's versatile, but that's kind of what I think the hope should be, is that he's this versatile swing guy where he can be the guy. He has multiple years of eligibility. It's not like he's a one and done mercenary transfer. He's someone that you can still build with and have on the offensive line long term. And I just think it's at some point, because you heard so many good things about this past offensive line class with Max Anderson, William Satterwhite, Bennett Warren, Jesse Perry, Gage Genther. They added a lot of bodies in that class. And this class, they only had, 3 or 2? Ogamoro and David Sanders. Was there another one? Who am I forgetting? Was there 3 offensive linemen they took this class?
I think that's it, right?
It's all off the top of my head. I cannot. And then, and what was Jeremiah's Hurd? Was he last class too, or was he 2 classes ago? They're all blending together.
Yeah, none of them have played, right? Even from last class,
Yeah.
So it's hard to re-rack your brain. I mean, all these guys are basically true freshmen. Hurd, I think, was 2 classes ago.
Okay. And that's and you look at this, and look, man, I just think the hope should be, and I think it's kind of one of those things where I understand, like, you're always retooling, and you're in year 5, and you have high expectations, over under 9.5, same as Georgia. Like, the expectations are high, so you don't want to wait on some of these redshirt freshmen that you brought in. But at the same time, I don't know, like, Cooper started as a redshirt freshman, and he was your guy for 4 years, still learning curve a little bit. If you believe that they're their guy, and that they might go through some growing pains early on, and the veteran like a Pendleton or a Moy or Carrick will have a higher floor early on, like, I understand the reflex to do that if you're Glenn Ellerby, but I think you kind of have to be like, no, like, that's the backup. Like, we have to try with Satterwhite or Max Anderson or something at center, see what happens. And if they struggle, this, that, and the other, then you have the veteran depth to kind of go a different direction. But I think you should give Satterwhite and or Max Anderson all the opportunity in the world in the spring and summer to earn this job. Because I think you really need to have some long-term answers on the offensive line. Yeah. Like, look at Ohio State, Georgia, Texas. These are not offensive lines built by transfers. Like, they might get a transfer or 2, but 4 starting transfers in year 5 just can't happen. Like, Tennessee's not a title team if they have 4 transfers in the offensive line, like, starting. Like, it can't happen.
So real quick, just to clarify, 3 offensive linemen in this 2025 class, Miss Nick Moore, yes. David Sanders, make up the 3. Hurd was 2 classes ago, class of 24. But like you're saying, yes, and it feels like, in this Heupel era, they just kind of rode the upperclassmen until now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're talking about the Lampleys, the Dane Davises. It just feels like everybody just got to these 5th, 6th year seniors and you just rode them the whole way. And there's been multiple classes of potential along the offensive line. Obviously not high end recruits, but none of them have seen the light of day so far. So I do agree with you that like the guys you recruited, got to see what they're made of. And this seems like a year with a lot of turnover along the offensive line to do that. I know you have the 2 newcomers who will obviously contribute, but obviously David Sanders needs to be getting a lot of reps. I would expect him to do that. And then, on the interior offensive line, there's going to be some opportunity, specifically at center, more than likely, to see what you got.
Absolutely. The other Tennessee football one that I'm going to throw your way, because I think this is an important one that I want Vol fans to understand. Like this is ultimately a make or break type deal for the Tennessee offense. And it's
this
a Tennessee
stat,
future.
Right?
It's a stat.
Yeah.
And it's Tennessee futures. So do you think true or false here? Or over under whatever, true or false. Nico Iamaleava finishes next season averaging 10.0 yards per attempt. Are you taking the over under for that?
I'm going to take the under. That would be a 2.5 yards per attempt leap from what he had this year, give or take. He had 7.8 this year, I believe. Yeah, 7.8 yards per attempt for Nico in 2024. So that would be a pretty big jump to go all the way to 10. And I just think you look at Tennessee's wide receiver core, and I don't know if the big play guys are there for Tennessee, for Nico to make that type of jump. And there's a lot of uncertainty, the wide receiver group for Tennessee, a ton of turnover, which I think is a good thing. It's very similar to what we saw from the Tennessee secondary a year ago, where everybody left, but it's probably a good thing because the guys that you had weren't, necessarily living up to expectation, and the wide receiver group wasn't performing like it needed to. So it's a good thing that there's this amount of turnover and that there's this much youth. But when you look at the types of players Tennessee has in its wide receiver room, I don't know if the offense is going to shift that much to involve the amount of big plays necessary for Nico to reach 10 yards per attempt. It's not a bad thing, but I just don't think that it will be that much of a leap.
I don't either. And I think that's kind of like it's not doom and gloom if he doesn't get to it. But I will say, like, when I was going through just a bunch of numbers in terms of past champs, the lowest yards per attempt for any quarterback who's won a national title in the last 8 years is 8.9 yards per attempt. And that was Michigan 2 years ago with J.J. McCarthy. That was almost 9 yards to attempt. But they also had the number one defense in college football that year. So if you're going to not be a dynamic down the field, big play offense, you better have the best defense in the sport. And I love where Tim Banks and this defense is right now, but do I think they're going to be number one in the country? No. So if you're not going to be number one in the country, you got to make it up on the offensive side. And it's chunk plays. Like if the chunk plays aren't back and the guys you mentioned where it's like that kind of big turnover, if Mike Matthews, Braylon Staley, Boo Carter, Chris Brazzell, they don't flip the script and we don't see something. You don't have to be 2022 again, but you do have to have the dynamic pass plays. You have to have more than just relying on Dante Thornton to survive. Like you can't live in 12 personnel. You can't have a game where Miles Kitselman leads you in receptions and yards, because Tennessee will lose that game every time. They lost to Georgia when that was the case. Like if you see tight ends leading Tennessee in receiving in the Heupel era, guess what? They lost that football game. Just going to go ahead. Spoiler alert. That's it. The games that Tennessee lost this season, every single one, Tennessee averaged less than 10 yards per reception. That's the other part of it. It's like if Dante Thornton didn't have a big play, they didn't win the football game. And that was because there was no other answer. So I think it's important. You don't have to get to 10, but that's what Mac Jones had the year he won it at Bama with those studs in 2020. But Joe Burrow right up there, Stetson Bennett, like even the number one defense, like they were third in yards per attempt. They were still taking deep shots. They were still hyper aggressive, throwing the ball down the field. If that's not there, like I think that really limits the ceiling. And I just think then you're looking at 3 out of 5 years of subpar offenses in the Heupel era, and it's just a bad trend on that side of the ball. It's huge. Nico, you got to unload. Nico's got to raise the yards per attempt, and it's not all on Nico, but there's no way around it. Like, the offense has to get back to down the field chunk plays.
And I think it's more likely to be that down the field chunk plays to reach that number than any sort of yak. You mentioned Stetson in there. Yeah. Stetson was helped a lot by yak from Bowers and co.
But he was still throwing it. He was aggressive. He was throwing it up, man.
They were, but that's been a big part of the Georgia offense is catch and run.
Yeah.
Even Hendon Hooker, I just looked at the stats in 21 and 22. He's just under 10. So he didn't even reach that.
They were top 10 in scoring both those years.
Right, but you're talking about this number, and
I'm not saying it has to be 10. It has to be like 9+, though. It has to be. Yeah.
I understand what you're saying. And Milton was the almost identical as Nico last year, I believe 7.9 in 23. So it just feels like what Heupel's offense has become, and it's probably to a fault. It's just a lot of quick game, a lot of screens, a lot of around the line of scrimmage, and maybe it's treating Nico with kid gloves a little bit at times last year. I think you'd like to see more trust in Iamaleava in 25, but it feels like there just would have to be a pretty drastic change in Tennessee's passing offense for it to get to that number, or even what Hendon did in 22 and 21.
I don't think it has to be that high, but it has to be close. And I think the other part of it is just you have to, and you hit on it, is you have to let Nico loose. Like, you have 3 scholarship quarterbacks now in that room: redshirt freshman 4-star and Merklinger, true freshman 4-star and George McIntyre. You got to let it rip. Like, last year you had to walk on and gas him more, and I understand, like, you kind of want to be conservative and make sure and pick your spots when you ran Nico, and as a redshirt freshman, getting his feet wet, this and the other. There's just too much on the line, and this is it for Nico, it seems like, either way. So you got to let it rip. Like, you want him to slide, you want him to really work on making sure he's not taking some terrible hits every game. But this offense, I truly, like, we joke in our group chat about it, but I'm like, the offense doesn't work if the quarterback is not going to be able to turn 2nd and 10 into 3rd and 3 when stuff isn't there, and be able to do stuff with his legs. Like, it doesn't work. Like, it just doesn't work. So I think he has to, you got to run him. Like, you're going to be tested right away against Syracuse. You played Georgia early. Like, he's going to have to run. Like, he is going, that it has to be part of every single big game is Nico Iamaleava using his legs and running often. Like, I don't think there's a way around it. There's a reason Hendon Hooker, it's not just because he was 24 years old. It's because Hendon Hooker was really, really good at knowing when things weren't there and taking off and just making things easier for the offense and just living to fight another down and making things shorter and helping that offense stay on the field longer and 3rd and short all the time.
Yeah. And, obviously the last time out, Nico's legs were the only thing working for the Tennessee offense against Ohio State. So maybe that, flips the switch a little bit for Josh Heupel and this offensive staff to realize that they need to incorporate that more in 25. Like you said, though, you got to let it rip. And when you look at it from a big play standpoint, which is what we're talking about here, Tennessee's gotten so many big plays out of the running back position in the last handful of years. It's hard to bank on that happening in 25. Like, Lewis, it's just not really the style of player he is. Bishop maybe can do it. We'll see what Star Thomas does. He had a couple of explosive plays at Duke last year, but you're not going to get the explosive plays you got out of Sampson last year, and especially not the big runs you got out of Jalen Wright during his time on Rocky Top. So that is largely going away. So you're going to need to bring back those big passing plays, because in 23, you're really relying on big running plays. Same in 24, probably not going to be there this season. So I agree with you. You got to have, more explosive passing plays if you want this offense to compete with the best of them and be a championship level offense. It's just going to take a lot, I think, for it to get there.
I agree. The last 20 champions in the sport were either number 1 in FEI defense or number 1 overall in terms of just combining the offense and the defense. Like, and Tennessee, I don't think the Heupel era is going to get number 1 in defense, but I do think they could be somewhere in the top 10. And you thought that the defense would be the harder part to get there. Defense was borderline top 10 in scoring this past year. I think there's a path to them being better in 2025. I think if you just putting in Edrees Farooq in the Will Brooks spot and Edwin Spillman in the Keenan Pili spot, I think that there are upgrades there. The Javon McCoy injury sucks, and I hope he's back and normal and ready to go. But if he is, like, I think you're going to be they don't really rotate there anyway. So I've seen a lot of people are like, oh, what are they going to do? They need another transfer. I'm like, Willie Martinez played Jermod and Ricky Gibson like 70 snaps a game last year.
It's because they're so much better. I just think
McMurray and Gibson are going to play 70 snaps. Like if Jermod can't go against Syracuse, guess what? They're just going to do those two are just playing 70 snaps, and it's not going to matter.
Well, I think the reports have mostly been positive about McCoy too. I wouldn't be worrying about him per se. Maybe you worry about a drop off a little bit just because he was so elite.
Yeah,
and it's tough to come back from an ACL, obviously, but I'm not. There's bigger fish to fry with this Tennessee team than the cornerback position, I should say.
100% agree. Baseball here at Jack Foster. I'm so excited that we get to talk baseball because we're so close to the college baseball season. First thing for you, and I kind of want to soft toss this to Ryan. I don't remember how long ago it was, but Cannon Peebles as the leadoff option because there's not an obvious leadoff guy for Tennessee right now. It's Jay Abernathy, but throwing that to a true freshman might be a little bit bold early on in the year. Maybe it's something he grows into as the season goes along. But I think there's a real case to make Cannon Peebles the leadoff hitter for Tennessee, at least starting out. What say you?
Okay, I was thinking about this. It makes sense in terms of how great Cannon Peebles at-bats were.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what you're going for here, right?
He's more the OBP guy. Like I think I'd trust him more than anything else, and he's going to get on base. And
that's
switch hitter.
Point.
Yeah.
But his consistent hitting wasn't great last year. I mean, obviously, he had a poor year hitting the baseball. And he was a power guy at NC State. So I don't really know if it works given the prototype of player he is and the type of hitter he is, and if he can reach his potential of what he showed at NC State in 2023, then you want him in the 4 through 6 range, 3 through 5 range, because if you remember opening day in Houston last year, or in Arlington, I should say, Cannon Peebles was 4th in the order. Like he was going to be the cleanup guy for Tennessee because of the high expectations and the fact that he raked prior to the season and winter workouts. So I think that's more of what Cannon Peebles is. I know he has great ABs and he can work, great walks. So he worked some very crucial walks down the stretch last year, but I don't feel like this is all that likely.
Well, who do you put in that spot? Because I think Backus is going to get the started left right out of the gate here. I don't think Colby's more of a leadoff guy. Inslee doesn't feel like a leadoff guy to me. Yeah, Inslee
probably not. Probably not, but although I could see it. Like I could see Hunter Inslee leading off.
I just like him in the middle of the order. I think that's where he settled in. Like somewhere between 5 to 7 is his sweet spot.
Yeah, I agree, but I would not be shocked at all if he's leadoff opening night. I think Abernathy is the move. Super fast.
Right out of the gate?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying, when you look back at the season when it's over, who led off more than any other person, Abernathy is probably going to be my pick. Obviously the speed's there. Even if he's DHing, then he'll be there, after a while, I think. I honestly would say Inslee leads off first game. But it just, you look at Curley, no. Fisher, definitely not. He's more of a power guy. Gavin Killen, don't think so. Brees Chapman, no. Wasn't consistent enough last year, although feels like he's going to have a big year. Bargo, no. So I think Abernathy's your answer. No, he strikes out too much.
What's the strike? Does he strike out that much?
He had a lot of empty ABs last year, and he goes cold. He went cold multiple times last year.
Well, I'm tossing
Inslee hardly ever goes.
Everybody who was caught up in the DH musical chairs, I'm just tossing it out. I'm tossing out the DH musical chair season. I don't know. Yeah,
there's obviously a ton of question with that spot, with left field, obviously the rotation at first base. There's so much question with this Tennessee team right now. It's hard to make a really confident prediction in these spots that are up in the air.
I just feel pretty like the other ones 2 through 9. I have a good feel for, but I'm like, leadoff is one. They haven't had I have no idea what Tony's going to do there. Like, I just think it's such a weird, and it's so important because they get the most at bats. Like, part of the reason Tennessee was so good offensively is like, oh, Semo's up again. Semo led Tennessee in at bats because Semo was batting leadoff. It's just one of those, oh God, he's up again. And there he goes. Another home run. Great. Great. Like, this is fantastic. And I'm obviously talking as if I was a fan of another team, it's like, God, is Simo up again? And it's just one of those where, I don't know. I just kind of want, like, I love the idea of a high OBP guy in that spot, even if it's not traditional, like a Cannon Peebles, just someone who's going to be, I don't even hate Dean Curley at 1. If he's already wearing number 1, going into next year, like, I wouldn't hate, like, your best hitter just batting leadoff. Like, I wouldn't discount that either.
Think he's Tennessee's best hitter?
Yeah. Who would you go?
Yeah. I mean, Fisher and Killen could have great years.
I think they're just too, like, Dean just feels complete to me. Like, Dean just feels like he's going to be a complete just masher, and it's just on base, walks, home runs, doubles.
Maybe he's the leadoff guy.
Yeah. I don't know. I do feel like Dean Curley's the best overall hitter on the team this year.
Okay. I'm not going to argue with that.
But we shall see. Best series of the season will be which one and why. So for the Vol fans who are like trying to figure, like, which one do I spin big for with the family? Which one do you think will ultimately be the best home series for Tennessee fans?
I mean, this feels pretty clear in that it's the national championship rematch, right? I mean, Texas A&M. Why not?
It's a
preseason number 1 across the polls, coming to town early April.
It's early though. Yeah.
Early. I mean, yeah. It's what, the 1, 2, 3. It's the 4th SEC series. So you'll have a pretty good idea of what these teams are. It's after Florida's first, Bama, South Carolina. Bama and South Carolina are both away. So it's the second series in LNS. Yeah, I think this is the one. You could argue that LSU will be more intriguing to watch because Tennessee's on the road in Baton Rouge. But if you're talking like what break the bank for, it's that one, followed closely by Vanderbilt just because of the rivalry and the fact it's in Knoxville this season. So those two are the best home series to me. Florida's obviously great too, but yeah, I'd go Texas A&M. The series was so great last year in Omaha.
Yeah,
Texas A&M has a lot of talent. Like I said, projected to be the best team. So Tennessee's going to remember that when they roll into Knoxville. I think that's got to be the number 1.
I think that's right. I just think they're in a weird spot. Like, they're just, like, obviously they were just there, but I mean, their coach leaves for the rival in really awkward fashion.
Yeah.
And then he's taking the assistant with him, and then he's not. Like, that he had the Rasheed Wallace Hawks graphic of like a hawk for 30 seconds, and he's like he's a Longhorn for a bit, and he's back. He's super young. We don't know what he's going to be like as head coach with these kind of expectations where you're preseason number 1 overall. Like, the expectations in College Station are sky high in Aggie land. So I don't know. And I will say this. I'm going to hate here a little bit. Tennessee home schedule kind of sucks. It kind of sucks this year for the fans. Like, it's not a great home slate. You get Auburn in there. I don't think Auburn's going to be good. Florida, I think that'll obviously be a fun one. But Ole Miss is on the road. You get Kentucky here. I think Kentucky's a step back team this year. Like I said, Auburn's not a great one. And then you got to go to Arkansas. It just feels like a lot of your best matchups are on the road this year. So I don't know. I don't love the home games. No Georgia at home. That would have been fun because I think they're going to be pretty good this year. But you've already got a lot on your plate schedule-wise. But I don't know. This is a pretty arduous schedule. I think this is harder than last year.
That's a fair point. I think any year you get Vandy and Florida and Knoxville, and then you also get the team you beat in the College World Series last year at your place. That's 3 awesome series. Yeah. And that's pretty much all you need to make up a good home schedule. And Kentucky, too, has been 5 what? 5 just great series? Is that
I want 5 great ones. I want 5.
I mean, every series is great in the SEC pretty much. Every team's so loaded. And Kentucky, by the way, has kind of been a thorn in Tennessee's side at times in the Vitello era, specifically this decade. So that one it's not necessarily a rivalry or anything that as much as the others, but it's still a more intriguing baseball series than, you would have projected Tennessee, Kentucky to be if you were looking at it 7 years ago.
You know what sucks with the Aggies too, coming into that series that weekend? Guess who Tennessee plays that Tuesday night?
Like prior?
Yeah. Tennessee Tech. team that gives them hell. Like if Tennessee Tech gives Tennessee hell, and like Tennessee just like struggles at home or they drop that one, they're sweeping the Aggies. Like if Tennessee Tech gives them anything, they're gonna be motivated. They're gonna be so frustrated coming into Friday because they're dealing with Tennessee Tech again. What's the timeout for? That's real. The Tennessee Tech problems are real.
Well, okay, that was kind of squashed last year. Let's be real.
Kind of. I mean, they've won 2 of 3 though, right?
Yeah, but they shut them out. It was a shutout last year, right?
But they won 2 straight. Am I misremembering that? 22 and 23, right?
But like this would have been the storyline going into last season. I think now it's like, okay,
they're trying to break even
against
Tennessee Tech.
Yeah. And let's not forget the first Tennessee Tech matchup in 2022 got canceled via rain delay, and Tech scored like 3 runs in the first inning off of old Hollis Fanning, I believe is who it was. So that game was like up in the air in the 3rd inning, and then it got canceled because of a storm. But it wasn't decided by any stretch of the imagination. I think it was tied. Tennessee may have been trailing. Hard to remember. But yeah, you're right. For a couple of years, it was like, wow, Tennessee Tech low-key owns the Vols. But last year, Tennessee, crushed them. So that's probably a thing of the past.
And just because I'm petty, I want Evansville on a Tuesday. Would have liked to get Evansville on here. Let's get an 18-1 win over Evansville on a May Tuesday.
Yeah, why not?
That would have been nice. Final one here for you. Do you think Nate Snead sticks as a Sunday starter this season? Like, it's kind of overlooked where we just look at him as a Swiss Army knife guy. We've talked all offseason, Jack, where it's like, it seems like the 1-2 is pretty obvious in terms of Tegan Kuhns and wow, why am I blanking on the Friday? Liam Doyle.
Yeah.
The Sunday has been kind of up in the air where it's like, do you go Dylan Loy, the former Pigeon Ford star who was kind of in the bullpen, different kind of guy, kind of more in the Xander role from the last couple of years. But they also, Nate Snead being just such a high upside guy, throws heat, can work multiple innings. We saw for Tony on Sundays with Xander a lot of the time. But do you think that's what ultimately happens, that we are overthinking who gets Sunday and that it actually just ends up being one of your best arms anyway, who's already pitched a lot of innings, and it's just like, just go Snead on Sunday. Let's not overthink this.
Yeah, it's just really dependent on who else gets a crack there. I think you'll see multiple arms. To me, it feels like there's 5. You mentioned 2 that feel really likely to be weekend guys all year, Doyle and Kuhns. Arvidsson's in the mix. You got Loy and Snead. So it's those 5. 3 will start majority of weekends. And, I think it's just how good is Loy / Arvidsson in a role that they have as potentially a starter early in the season, getting the crack at it. And if they struggle, then you'll see Snead. But if Loy is just hyper efficient, building off what he showed last year, then the best case scenario for Tennessee is to have Snead out of the bullpen. The high velo guy, late game situation, can use him multiple times in a weekend. Blow guys away for 1 inning if you need to. So that's the best case scenario for Tennessee, in my opinion, is for Loy to be not saying he has to be as good as Xander was, especially in the postseason last year, but for Loy to be on that Xander path, as you mentioned, low velo guy, lefty, just Beam-esque too along those lines, and for Snead to be your dynamite bullpen arm. But maybe those expectations are a bit too lofty. It's just, I think that's the best case scenario for Tennessee. So I'm going to sell Nate Snead being, having the majority of Sunday starts this season. I'm actually going to sell it. I'm going to say he ends up becoming a bullpen arm for Tennessee again, and one of the best in the nation, which is what Tony Vitello and the staff, I think, want more than anything.
I think it's better for Tennessee if he's not. And it's like, I agree.
He's not a starter.
Yeah. If he's a starter, that means some other stuff may have gone awry, where it's like plans change and sorry, man. Like we gotta have you on Sundays.
Yeah, it just didn't go as good as it could have, I think. It's not necessarily a wry or a really bad negative, but maybe Dylan Loy is just a Kirby Cannell type of guy, where he comes in for an inning and he's a bridge guy in a given game. And, you can trust him with a key inning here and there. But, if he obviously has the chops to be a starter, I think, too. It's just, can he capitalize on an opportunity? He's given Arvidsson as well, the JUCO guy. Can he do that? And then, that this is obviously banking on Doyle and Coons being good and
hold on,
doing
Coons
what
is
they're
a lock.
supposed to
I'm
do.
locking in Tegan Coons. The name
Well, to me,
is just
Liam Doyle is the
stuff.
top lock. Doyle is like the lock.
I think
Coons
Doyle is the
likely,
lock,
but
but I think
not a
Tegan
lock.
Coons is right there. When Tony's comparing him to Blade Tidwell, like, all right, go ahead and lock it in.
That was a good sign.
Things are great. Like, go ahead and buy your Tegan Coons stock, folks. Like, Tegan Coons is going to be the dude. And then, I mean, the other mid-season question is AJ Russell, because it seems like he's going to come back. It's like, do you risk him in the rotation? Because, I mean, obviously, he's your most talented arm, but do you really want to throw him in the middle of the year to be I think he's more of like I'd honestly kind of want him to be like a Joyce for Tennessee, where it's just in Keegan, like he's just, oh God, we're making a run here late, and it's just, oh, here's their best pitcher out of the bullpen to do 2 innings and just throw heat and just throw nasty stuff and just win these games.
Imagine Coons and Lloyd, being what they're supposed to be for Tennessee this season, and then you have Snead and Russell late in SEC
looming,
play, just pump 99 at your face out of the pen. It's just going to be so lethal if that's the case. And like I said, that's the best case scenario for Tennessee.
I think the pitching's going to be a lot better this year. I think, and look, the pitching obviously did, but I think the pitching's going to be a lot better. I think they got a lot of dudes. And I think it's going to play itself out, and we're going to be like, oh, this like, I just think they have a lot of depth, especially in the bullpen, where last year they were thin. I mean, it was at a point where like, we got to throw Combs out again here, and it was like, I don't know what's going to happen here if he doesn't get out of this inning. I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think they have a lot more options.
It required Kirby to no longer be a one batter guy. It was like, hey, you're like actually a top bullpen arm this year now.
Yeah.
And if Kazi gets rocked on a given weekend, we are in a sticky situation. And Xander becoming awesome saved them so big. Like,
not even just awesome, legendary. Like an all-time, like that run may never get topped again. Like,
unbelievable. And it's still to this day, like, I think you and everyone's still like, how did that even happen? Like, it became out of freaking nowhere. And that's the most significant reason Tennessee was able to cap its postseason run with a natty, I think. Not necessarily the reason they were a national championship, capable team in that sense, but, Secret's postseason runs, why they won. I think the most significant reason.
I mean, I agree. And it's the all-time best story. It's going to be hard to top because, I mean, like you said, it's just a super great dude, and the hat falling off, everything. Like, he's just not throwing heat because everyone throws heat, and I think that's part of the fun. It's just he's just throwing 75, and it's just like just finding ways out. But it was also just like we were so confident in Xander starts down the stretch. We were like, I like Xander, but it was also like you were treating him like he was Greg Maddux out there, where it was like, no, dub, put Xander back out there. Tennessee is going to keep moving. Like, get Xander back out there, automatic dub. We know where this is going. Xander and Snead, that's all we need.
Yeah, who would have thought that, going into last season, it's like, hey, as this team is on its path to natty win, you are by far the most confident in Xander Sechrist on the mound than anyone. And it wasn't close. Like, Drew Beam, you're like, Drew Beam's good and QB1, but dude, any given time, like, he could, it could be ugly. And
Drew Beam was in the year 2 Doe zone, where like Doe,
I agree. Yeah,
it's just he was going to give up 2 to 3 runs. It was always going to happen. Like, he could give you 6 to 7 innings, but there's going to be 1 or 2 that's taken. It's just gone, and you're like, all right, you need to plan to score 4+ runs. It doesn't mean they're not elite. It doesn't mean they're not really good. It just, for whatever reason, it just felt like 2 to 3 runs were inevitable every start.
Yeah, but it ended up working out, and we could obviously talk about that 2014 team for hours and hours, couldn't we?
I mean, we could, but it's a 25 team. Don't sleep on it. It's gonna be fun. A lot of new faces that folks are gonna have to get used to. But I think, I mean, they're number 3, number 4, number 5, depending on who you look at for a reason. They're gonna be really good. But I do feel, I don't know if you feel the same. I think they're gonna be a hybrid of 22 and 23, and I don't know if that wins a national title. It's obviously almost impossible to go back to back, but I don't think it's going to be as much of a fall from grace early on, where they're that preseason early on and they really struggle and the hitting just really goes in the tank. Like, I don't think that's going to happen, but I also think they have more personalities kind of resembling the 22 team, where I think they have more of, I think there's going to be a lot of Vol villainess to the 25 team that we haven't seen the last couple of years.
Word is Doyle and Fisher are, they bring the personality to the diamond. I agree. It's like the offense, can't expect it to be as good as last year, obviously. And, like you said, maybe the pitching's better. There's a lot of question around. It's just a lot more newcomers this year for the pitching staff. Like, you had familiarity last couple of seasons with those guys that became dudes in the 22 season that you're able to ride. But, obviously it can work out for Tennessee just fine, but the offense won't be as good. And as a Tennessee fan, you're going to want to hope that the fall off, like you said, isn't as drastic as it was early in those 23 SEC series. I don't foresee it being in that. I think this staff will have these dudes ready to roll.
Yeah, I mean, I think Reese Chapman's poised. Like, I think it would not surprise me if he has a Kavares tier Dylan Drying breakout this year. It wouldn't surprise me if there's still one more level for Hunter Endley to reach. It wouldn't surprise me if Dean Curley is a superstar this year. It wouldn't surprise me if Andrew Fisher leads the team in home runs and he rakes at third.
It's really just how good is Abernathy, and then can Bargo and Peebles stay consistent? Because we know what those guys can do, but consistency's been an issue. So can they?
But the positive there too is what I think was different 2 years ago is they didn't have other options internally behind them at that point. You have options like Stone Lawless and Levi Clark are right there, and these are freshmen who are going to be, I think, that next wave of Tennessee superstars. They're going to play. I think Stone Lawless is going to play.
He'll start probably once a weekend behind the plate.
At least, and we'll see what he hits. Like, if he's raking like the way that we think he might be able to rake, like he might be just too good to keep out of the lineup. Because we talk about like Jay Abernathy, just too good of a hitter to keep out of the lineup early. Stone Lawless might be in that same, like Cannon Peebles and Dalton Bargo have to be on their P's and Q's, because I think these two are going to push.
Yeah, and Lawless is the direct backup to both. So it's like, hey, I can play first and I can catch. So, and then it's like when Lawless plays at catcher, does Peebles DH? Like, how good is Abernathy? Is Colby taking the step and taking the Jarrell Ortega path of like, hey, I was a bench warmer for a couple of seasons, and then finally found my footing, was able to make a huge impact on a team. I think that would be a great story, but we'll just have to see it. This non-conference run here is going to be very intriguing to learn a lot about this team. It feels like we can learn more about this team early on than we have been able to for any Tennessee team in a long time. Like, there's a lot more uncertainty. It's not question of, are they going to be good? It's, I don't know what this looks like. So it's like, okay, everything is going to matter early on, because it's like going to school. We're going to learn about this team and who these guys are.
100%. Jack Foster, what can they go check out from you and the team of our Omaha Productions this week?
Yeah, so we actually had a great episode of Always College Football that aired January 30th, and it's a one-on-one with Cardale Jones. It's GMAC and Cardale going back and forth for a good 35-40 minutes, and it's all about Cardale's path to Ohio State and his career in Columbus. Going to be doing that every Thursday with a former college athlete. Try to get a national championship winning athlete when we can every Thursday as part of our Thursday Conversation series. Really fun stuff you should check out. SV Pod shifted to weekly, talking mostly NFL. Now with the college season over, you can find that early on in the week and follow SV Pod at _SV Pod on social. You can also follow Always College Football at OACFB. And then if you want to follow me, I'm at Jack Foster Media. There you go. Jack Foster. Keep up the great work, my friend. Go subscribe to all the great shows that Omaha Productions is putting together, that Jack is putting together. And if you saw a clip from Omaha Productions, it's probably Jack. Jack's doing a good job. It's probably Jack. Jack Foster, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to you next week.
Chase Thomas Podcast, for people who have nothing but time to kill.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ. Joining me, Volquest.com zone. Go subscribe today if you are not already. Brent Hubbs is here. Brent, good afternoon. Sir, how are you?
It's a little strange to be doing this daylight time instead of after dark, but I'm doing well. Hope you're good, my friend.
Absolutely. And look, we're both not cold nature people, and it's starting to warm up a little bit, so we're feeling a little bit better. I'll take that over the 8 degrees that we were getting last week or whatever it was.
January was only 87 days long as opposed to 31. So hopefully the doldrums of January are past us, and looking forward to the 60-degree weather in February. We don't know. I mean, we're going to get like a March snow because February is going to be warm. But listen, having lived here all my life, I will take any 60-degree day I can get April 1st and just say, hey, it's a blessing. So hopefully we get a bunch of those next week. Lindsey Nelson Stadium needs a bunch of those, by the way, next week as well, as they try to get that place ready for first pitch on Valentine's Day.
I also kind of wondered too, like with the Big Ten and SEC just pulling away in so many different ways. Brent, it's kind of wild. I don't know what the costs are. What could it cost? I'm like Arrested Development. What could it cost? $7 in terms of like a dome stadium, like with the Twins, what they do for baseball. I'm like, why is Ohio State not just allocated some money? Like, we're doming it up. Like, why aren't all the Big Ten teams who have the money be like, we're doming this bad boy up? Because there's no chance of competing without doming it up.
Having been to Columbus, Ohio in December and seeing that, I think Ohio State is going to spend $40 million on a roster before they spend $4 million on their football stadium. So,
yeah,
I don't foresee any dome life anytime soon anywhere in the Big Ten.
I just meant baseball. Like, I meant just baseball, not football. Football, no, keep baseball, it out. No, I'm talking about baseball because nobody wants to play
baseball. Yeah. They don't care about baseball up there.
I know, but it's just sitting there. I want to see someone in baseball in the Big Ten do it.
But again, if you spend all that money in baseball, you're not going to have money to spend on your football roster.
I mean, yeah, Northwestern, you're never winning the title. You're building this whole new stadium. You're never winning the title.
I don't know what they're doing.
I mean, that new stadium, like, are we living in the same world? Northwestern football?
I have no idea what we're doing there. I got no clue.
I mean, goodness gracious. And then you saw the ACC stuff today with the adjustments to how much Florida State and company are getting. And it's like, writing's on the wall if you're Wake Forest and company and
Cal and SMU and all those other schools. And there's like, hey, we're going to do everything we can to keep Clemson and Florida State from leaving us. Florida State's going, hey, we can finish our renovations to Doak Campbell now that we were at a third capacity for our 2-win football season this past year. So life's getting a little better for them. Absolutely.
And then conveniently, like the leaving fee goes down significantly after 5 years. And I'm sure they're not going to exercise that. I'm sure the ACC is going to be just fine up until 2036, Brent.
I think the fascinating part for them, of course, 5 years is probably better for Florida State right now because I'm not sure where Florida State lands if they leave. Like who wants them? I don't know that Greg Sankey and the SEC would make a hard play there.
Yeah.
I don't know that the Big Ten would make a hard play and would want them there. So where do they land? I think that's why all of the talk about them suing to leave and all that other stuff got shelved pretty quick because it was like, I'm not sure you got many options to date or to court now. I mean, now 5 years from now, when maybe we're closer to a breakaway or we've gotten a breakaway and you're in the super conference world, that might look totally different. But for Florida State, getting what they're getting now and having that, 5 year, that ability to leave in 5 years from now is a major win. I'm sure all the officials at Florida State are going, all right.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure where they were going to land if they didn't get something done this way. I know that's not what you asked me about. It has nothing to do with your Tennessee podcast, but it is pretty fascinating for them because I think they were a little bit stuck. Even though they didn't want to be, they were a little bit stuck. So now they get unstuck financially, but they still have the freedom in 5 years. They have an easier path in 5 years to leave than they've ever had.
Absolutely. And hey, at least it ensures that we're going to not have to talk about this stuff for 5 straight off seasons here, Brent. At least it seems like they're going to be set in stone here for the next half decade, which is nice because the sport just, I don't know if it can handle continually having these, who's going where, who's suing who. Like, it's exhausting. Like, no one wants that to be the narrative every off season for years. So at least you get a little bit of a break.
Yeah, because I don't know that anybody else is moving. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, they were the only one that kind of captured anybody's attention that anybody was really talking about. And I mean, listen, college football's got a lot of things to fix that involves everyone, not involving one team trying to leave a conference.
Absolutely. Brent, so there's a lot of stuff I want to pick your brain on here because you and I think have just not naturally gravitated to I'm not going to say cynicism about where there's some battered Vols syndrome here in a lot of ways between you and I.
You're too young to have battered Vols syndrome.
Look, the only
You're a half empty guy. That's the story there.
But I'm really not, because I'm like a half glass full of baseball, where I'm like, no, embrace the baseball. Like baseball, Omaha is likely.
They just won a national title. How in the world would you not be happy?
Well, I'm saying even 3 years ago, I'm saying I'm glass out. Like they're gonna get there. Like it was one of those. Even when they lost and were upset by Notre Dame, it was never like did they? It's like no. Tony Vitello's built the juggernaut. Like as long as he's here, you've got a Nick Saban of Alabama baseball thing going on right now. Like you're the cool university for baseball right now, and you're gonna be that for a little while longer, however long he does it. Like enjoy that. Like you can compete for national titles every year there, but basketball, like let's see it. Like we'll see where Rick Barnes is and company on Saturday against Florida. And then who knows at this offseason, depending on what happens with the fifth year and all that kind of stuff, how much turnover and how much change could be in store for the men's hoops team going into 25, 26. But with football, it's like, things are pretty good. And I think I'm kind of like you, where I just kind of hesitate when people are like, okay, the ceiling and you're trending in the right direction. I have always maintained it's, especially in the portal era, Brent, it's a lot easier at these big time schools like a Tennessee to go from disaster to good than from good to elite. It is still, that is the hardest jump to make. And Heupel has gotten them to good, and he's had a very good season in 2022. But to get to that final point, to get to that like elite of the elite, the Ohio States, the Oregons, the Georgias, the Texases, like it's hard. It's a hard club to break into, and those teams are not going anywhere as it stands right now anytime soon. So I just look at it. I'm like, look, things are pretty good, but it's also like I do think I think it's fair to wonder if we're nearing the ceiling of what this could really be year over year for Tennessee football. Is that fair? Like I think we're close to the ceiling where you're like you could be a yearly. The floor is so high that you can be a yearly CFP contender here. But I do have questions. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if they'll ever have a roster as good enough on both sides to, win a national title. Maybe, maybe not. But I think it's eventually you have to have the conversation of like, well, yeah, you're building. Things are better. The roster's getting a little bit better. But we have almost 5 years now, and it's like things are really good. But can they be elite? I don't know. I tend to think no, but I feel like that's a little harsh right now, and I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we know the answer to that question. Yeah. I think in any sport, and I think really in anything you're trying to perfect, it's hard to go from good. It's harder to go from good to elite than from bad to good. Baseball broke through this year, right? Because they went and won the whole daggum thing. But up until this year, there was can they manage Omaha? Can you stay in the winner's bracket? And think about it. I mean, I won't call it a miracle, but it was a heck of a rally against Florida State to stay in the winner's bracket. If you lose that one with your pitching, I mean, are you getting out? Are you getting to the final series if you lose your opening round game out there? And if you don't rally in the ninth inning, then our conversation about baseball is, well, what does Tony Vitello have to do to break through in Omaha? Why is Omaha why is Omaha just such a hard deal for him? I mean, why is that? Why can't he break through in Omaha? Okay. Where are we at in basketball? I mean, everybody's talking about trying to get, you got to the Elite Eight. I mean, how do you get to the Final Four? It's so hard to get to the Final Four. It's hard to get to the Elite Eight. So many things have to fall your way. What's different about basketball and football in particular, I don't know that you throw baseball into this because baseball is such a grind. Basketball is all about getting hot at the right time. You shoot it well for 2 weekends, or you shoot it well for 1 weekend, bam, you're all of a sudden playing the next weekend, whether that's the Final Four, whether that's to get to the Sweet 16, whatever it is. That's why there's always these great upsets, because somebody put up a 3 for 44 from the 3-point line, or 6 for 44, whatever. They shoot 20% from the 3-point arc and they go home, even though they're a 2 seed or a 1 seed, as we've seen in the past, or a 4 seed. The question with football is, can there be a Cinderella through the playoffs? I mean, can somebody sort of come out of nowhere, right? And the notion is no. even though Arizona State was right there to knock off Texas, potentially. But the other games, they were like, they weren't competitive.
Yeah.
Right. So is football, how far away is football from being, all right, we got 12 teams in the playoff and they're pretty evenly matched. They've got a real, everybody's got a real shot there. I don't know. I mean, what is Tennessee, what do they look like if they don't lose to Arkansas and they're hosting a home game in the playoffs?
I mean, are they still playing a true freshman, Braylon Staley, 50 snaps, who hadn't played all year?
What do they look like? Where are they at that point? If they're on the bottom half of that bracket, what does that look like versus playing? I mean, part of it.
But would you feel better? Like, because I saw that a lot in the VQ and stuff, but would you feel better? Because the offense wasn't anywhere close to being able to win a national title. Like, the offense couldn't, they weren't even close. They were 94th in passing in conference play. But they weren't close.
But you got there. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, and you were really good on defense by the numbers, except, the two biggest games you weren't there. I mean, I get your point, but at the same time, too, I don't think it should be a situation where we're suddenly like, well, I mean, being a college football playoff contender just means you're good or you're okay. I mean, you're still better than good. You're still better than okay if you're making the college football playoff. Because remember, I mean, you're not that far removed from being completely irrelevant. Now, to counter all of that, I'll say this. Josh Heupel's in at a time where he's got to find a counterpunch for his offense because of what we've seen the last 2 years. Because Hendon Hooker's not going to come walking through the door, right? Jalen Hyatt's not going to come walking back through the door. Teams have adjusted to how they play you. So how do you adjust? Is the fact that you were 94th in total?
94th in conference play in passing.
Okay, you're 94th in passing, yet you still won 10 games and got to the college football playoff. Now, does that mean you overachieved? You were better than what you achieved more than you should have achieved? Does that mean you're just a benefit of a schedule? Does that mean Josh Heupel's got real problems with his offense? Like, where does all of that factor in? Does it mean Josh Heupel did a better job coaching because they weren't elite on offense than he did maybe when they were elite? All of those things you sort of look at. But what I see is it feels harder on offense right now. So how do you make it easier? And that's Josh Heupel's challenge.
Yeah. And I think that leads into this question here. And it's a true and false one I have for you, Brent. And it's Tim Banks and the defense makes it hard to fairly decipher where the Vols football program is right now under Heupel. Do you think that's true or false?
Hard to decipher why.
I think he's clouded things a little bit. And it kind of goes back to what you were just saying. And something I've seen is the last 4 years, because Heupel, he's an offensive coach. The defense is the defense. William Inge, Rodney Garner, Willie Martinez, and Tim Banks, they're running the show on that side of the ball. They have raised the floor every single year. You were 90, I think they were 96 there that first year in scoring defense. They go up to 33rd, then to 22nd, and now they're borderline top 10 this past year. So the scoring defense is getting better and better every year. You allow one team all season this past year to score 20 points offensively against you. They did their job all season long. The defense stepped up in so many different ways that gave this team a chance to win 10 games, make the CFP, that I think it kind of clouds where Tennessee is because Heupel's he has the best winning percentage of any Tennessee head coach since Fulmer. But a lot of that for the last 2 years has been because the defense has picked up the slack. The defense is kind of the identity of Tennessee football right now. And you have an offensive-minded coach. I think that's kind of where I'm saying is it true that Tim Banks has raised things so much? And it's good. And it's a testament to Heupel that he hired well on that side of the ball and has replaced guys well. When Brian John Marie goes to Michigan, he goes and gets William Inge, who is a co-DC and a great linebackers coach. And he's doing well in the class. I'm really excited. I have a linebackers question for you, but Rodney Garner going out of the wheelhouse, things like that. That side of the ball has been really strong, and he deserves credit for that because you look at it could go way worse. And the people who in the offseason were like, I don't want Tim Banks. I don't know what to tell you. Tim Banks is top 15 at the very least DC in the country. A lot of teams would like to have Tim Banks right now. And he could have gone the Alex Grinch way. Remember, that set USC back by him going with Alex Grinch early on. And then he has D'Anton Lynn, the defense is making strides. but he's already lost a lot. He's already lost a lot of goodwill. We've seen coaches go the wrong way. Dan Mullen hiring Todd Grantham. That did not go well. And that eventually, there's some loyalty there that sometimes screws over these offensive coaches if they get the other side of the ball wrong that they're not as familiar with. Heupel deserves credit for going the right way in that regard, but it also clouds stuff because Tennessee could win 10 games again next year, Brent, and the offense could still just be kind of, I don't know, because I think the scoring defense could be even better. They could be in the top 7. I'm really high on the linebackers. I think the James Pierce stuff is overblown. I think they're going to be just fine at edge in the Leo spot. I think there's a path where Tim Banks has raised the ceiling so high on the defensive side that it just gives the Heupel in this offense so much of a buffer that it's hard to decipher. Is there real problems with where Tennessee's going because you have an offensive-minded coach and the offense is just stuck in the mud, but the defense is so good that it doesn't really matter most weekends. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, I guess in some. I mean, look, you give Tim Banks and his defensive staff credit for what they've built, and they've been able to hold together and build off of, which is, I mean, that's why they're where they are. It was the offense the first 2 years that carried, this program, and the defense is getting there, and has put themselves in a position to obviously win games. Here's the thing about the offense. I mean, they still scored. I mean, they still averaged pretty good, even though some of that, I know if you take out the throwaway games, the payday games, right, then that skews the numbers and makes the numbers look bad. Well, how much better does that make your scoring defense look as well? And I mean, listen, I'm a stats guy. I'm a numbers guy. I've always been a numbers guy, but you can turn that stat into whatever it needs to be turned into. I think it also all goes hand in hand. And I think that's where, and I think Josh Heupel is aware of this, is trying to be very mindful of this because he is such an offensive guy. It can't be in your building and it can't be your offense versus your defense. It's all got to go together. I mean, and so does the offense have to be better? Yes. Does the defensive success cloud where the program is? I'm going to answer no, because I think I can separate the fact that the defense is growing and moving in the right direction, and they have to correct some things on offense for this team and this program to take that elite step that you're talking about. So I don't know if I'm answering that question. I think you got to be careful not to get into it's the offense versus the defense because they are collaborative together. I mean, quite frankly, the offense in some ways this year helped Tim Banks' defense because they played more ball control. They ran the football more. There were fewer 30-second 3-and-outs and drives.
Yeah.
There were times Josh Heupel said, hey, Florida was standing when he went for it on his own 28 or whatever that mess was. There were so many other times this year where he punted at midfield. And in 21 and 22, that was an automatic go for it. Hey, it's 4th and 8 at the 50. Well, we're going for it because we can't stop them anyway. So we're going to go. Now he's sitting there going, hey, let's punt it. Let's pin them inside the 5 and let's get a stop. And it worked really about all year long with the exception of Arkansas. They had Arkansas backed up inside the 5 and gave up a rail route to the running back or give up a ball in the flat to the running back that let them out of jail. That was a huge play in that loss. But they played more field position. Josh Heupel played more conservative offensively this year in terms of playing the game that way because he leaned on his defense a little bit more. Whereas in the first couple of years, they didn't lean on the defense at all. The defense is like, hey, you got to score 50 to give us a chance.
Yeah.
So it's got to go hand in hand. It can't be us against them. And I think Josh Heupel has to be very careful. I think that's why you saw Josh Heupel after the NC State game. Remember that quote where he's like, at Tennessee, we played defense too. Yeah. Well, that was hey, we're together. It's not just all about us offensively because for 2 years, it's been all about us offensively. And it's got to be about both if you're going to be a championship program.
I also think you have to throw in the Oklahoma game because that to me was like, now looking back on the 24 season, that was the inflection point, I think, for the year, for the offense, where, look, they were banged up at tackle, but you saw, like, you had to go 12 personnel. Like, it was fun 12 personnel against NC State, where your Stays and Kitzelman are getting open. You're like, oh, this is a new wrinkle. This is fun. But it wasn't a requirement to survive. In Norman, it was a requirement to survive. Was, hey, Nico's going to get his brains beat in if we're not going 12 personnel throughout. And then the rest of the year, it was just kind of like you had to live in 12 personnel. You had to be wary of what your tackles were doing all season long. You had to kind of adjust and play to your defense because the protection wasn't going to be there. And the receivers were also a part of that, and they had a rough year outside of Tate Thornton as well. But I think that is part of the reason that Heupel had to kind of lean right on the defense. It's like he didn't have a choice with the tackles being what they are.
No question. And they've got to, I mean, listen, that's what we're talking about for this. To use it in golfers' terms, if you're going to break 70, okay, you're a nice 80s golfer right now. If you're going to break 70 and be in the final grouping on Sunday, so to speak, then you have to fix some problem issues on offense. And what are those problem issues? Lack of explosives. Those numbers have dropped the last 2 years. They've gone down. Part of that's execution. There was some guys open this year. They missed them. Okay, in games, they dropped some balls. They've got to execute that better. Schematically, they've got to do some things better to help there. And two, they've got to score in the red zone. They've got to finish drives when they get inside the 35-yard line. And then obviously when they get on into the red zone. I mean, their numbers dramatically different. I mean, I think they were 50% was their touchdown percentage in SEC play when they were in the red zone. That's not good enough. I mean, you've got to score touchdowns when you're in there if you're going to upset Georgia, or you're going to beat Alabama on the road, or you're going to win at Florida. You can't go down there and kick field goals, or you can't get the ball to the 35-yard line and have a holding penalty and have to punt.
Unless you're killing it in the explosive touchdown game.
Yeah, but I mean, for the most part, and here's the other thing too. I mean, what have we learned the last 2 years? What are defenses going to do? They're going to try to make you drive it 10 plays. Because you know what they're not going to do? They're not going to play a lot of one-on-ones with the safety versus the slot and say, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our chances and let you throw it 70 yards. We're going to see if you can consistently do it for 12 plays and not make mistakes, not make a mistake to take yourself out of the – it's the NFL world. I mean, that's what the NFL teams are doing, right, and are trying to do. Now, there's still explosives in the NFL, but defensive coordinators, they're fine with you driving the ball 20 to 30. 20 to 40, right? How many times do we watch, do we hear Tony Romo on CBS going when the offense crosses the 50-yard line or the 40-yard line against the Chiefs, and how much talk is there about Spagnuolo now coming with exotic blitzes?
Yeah.
Here they come, and Tony's going into Tony world about all of that kind of stuff. I say that like we're long lost buddies, but you know what I mean. He gets on that tangent about that deal because that's where they get really exotic and kind of go crazy because they're okay with you driving it for the first 30 yards, first 40 yards. But then they get crazy there. So that's why you've got to finish because teams are not going to let Tennessee consistently do what they did in 22. I'm not saying 22 is this unicorn that can never remotely be close. You can never get close to that. I don't know that we're going to see a year where you are that explosive game in and game out, where it's like, okay, at what point in the first quarter does Jalen Hyatt get 10 yards behind somebody?
Yeah.
I just don't know that defenses are going to, they've seen this thing for 4 years. They've got a better handle on it. They're playing it differently. They're disguising the safety stuff. That's why Josh Heupel and his offensive staff have to have some counters to some things. What is that? Is it more tight end throws? Is it more backs out of the backfield? Is it more shallow crossing stuff and less deep crossing stuff? I don't know what the answer is. I'm not good enough as an offensive coach or a football guy to know what an offensive coach thinks he can do or can't do. But I just don't think you can sit there and go, okay, we're going to run a switch route and get a guy 5 yards wide open whenever we want to. And that's what it felt like in 22, which is the unicorn. I mean, that is the year that everybody's going, oh, when do we get LSU again? Where Jalen Hyatt, nobody even knew Jalen Hyatt was basically on the field.
Yeah.
Like Jalen Hyatt had, I don't know how many yards he ended up that day, but I bet 80% of his throws, there wasn't a defender in the TV screen when he caught the ball. That's just not going to, I mean, That's just not going to happen. Teams are going to defend you different. So what's your counter to it?
Yeah, I think that's all fair.
And the counter this year was run the football.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
but you're always going to have success. If you look at the last 4 years, they've averaged basically 5 yards per carry in all 4 years.
Because teams are also you get lighter boxes. Now they're doing the lighter box differently. Okay. So are you committed to running the ball? All right. Can you be more explosive in the run game? I don't know. I mean, what do you do? What do you do to find a counter to some of those things, to ultimately getting more people in the box, to getting some of those matchups that you're looking for?
And Jalen Wright was that, right? 2 years ago, because Jalen Wright was a home run hitter. Like Jalen Wright, when he gets second level, he's gone. Like, he saw that that was different. Like, Jalen's your best back. And I love Dylan Sampson. Jalen Wright was your best back in the Heupel offense.
He was the most explosive back.
Yeah.
I don't know that he was the most productive all the time, but he was the most dangerous back.
Yes.
He's the guy that he could go to the house anywhere on the field.
And that's incredibly important in the Heupel offense, especially when the passing game and stuff. Like, it's just different. Like, those guys who can break it for 80 at a moment's notice. And I think they missed that. Like, I think Sampson was really good, but I think Jalen's just big home run threat. And he was just so good at staying up. Like, when he bounced off contact to keep it going, like, he was just... Jalen was... I can't say enough glowing things about Jalen. But switching gears here a little bit, Brent. The linebackers. I've been on this offseason where Tennessee got some bad luck with Keenan Peely with the injury stuff, because I think that would have helped a lot, especially in the Georgia game, the Ohio State game in particular. I think having Keenan Peely in the middle of the field would have been helpful. That being said, this group now, I think Edwin Spillman flash, and you can tell William Inge likes Edwin Spillman, and Aaron Carter being in year 3. He is very familiar with this scheme and was forced into kind of really being kind of the leader with Keenan Peely going down. So he was kind of thrown into the fire in back-to-back years in different ways at Tennessee. But I just think they're only going to be playing talented guys. T-Lander is really good at what T-Lander is really good at linebacker. I think you're going to see the best linebacker play that Tennessee's had in the 5 years that Heupel's been here. Do you agree? Because I think linebacker play is going to be really good, and I think that was something that was kind of taken advantage of in the Ohio State, Arkansas, and Georgia games this past fall. And I don't think that's going to be the case if they can stay healthy, because I think they're going to have dudes.
Yeah, I mean, they've got to play better. I mean, Aaron Carter's got all the athletic ability in the world. He's got to limit some mistakes, some mental mistakes. You know, Edwin Spillman athletically is going to be better than anybody they probably played out there, or as good as anybody they've played out there at all. And so I think it's more of a mental thing, and I think it's schematically, how are you going to help them a little bit in pass coverage? How are you going to defend the middle of the field? You know, I think I love Rodney Garner. I like that group he had. I don't think they had their best year. I think they were better the year before with the same dudes. I think Tim Banks 100% believed in that group and probably was less aggressive with some different pressures and different looks and things like that. And I think that, you know, you probably got to get back to doing some different things. I mean, I think that he really believed that they could run a bunch of games up front, twist and things, and get home on a regular basis. And so you didn't bring as much pressure on maybe 3rd and 6. Now, 3rd and 12, play at the sticks, keep the ball in front of you, make a tackle, you know. But I think there are times that, you know, probably could have been more aggressive. They got to be better with their blitz packages. Those guys have to get home better. I don't know that they have a great group of blitzing linebackers. You know, I think Beasley was really good at kind of shooting gaps, whether it's a run blitz or, you know, even in pass, you know, even in a passing blitz situation. You know, they didn't bring a lot of nickel pressures, you know, nickel blitzes like they had done kind of some of the previous years. Some of that boundary corner blitz stuff, they you know, trusted their corners and trusted their front. So I'm curious to see where Tim Banks kind of adjusts moving this year too. Like what does he look at and say, well, we could do this better. We need to do that better. They were much better on 3rd down all season long. So I don't want to take anything away from what they accomplished, because they are the reason you won 10 games. But again, we're talking about going from, you know, shooting 84 to breaking 80. What do you got to do in some of those situations? And I think that's what you look at in the offseason. So I like the athletic ability of that group at linebacker. They've got to be much better in pass coverage if they're going to drop them into coverage. And if you're not going to drop them into coverage, and you don't think that they're great in zone coverage, then you're going to have to bring some guys too and mix it up a little bit more. So I do think you're going to see teams test them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think you're going to see teams throw sideways, you know, and try to get it to guys on the move like Ohio State did. We saw Arkansas do that some, and really stress that second level side to side to see if they can cover. That's the one thing that when I watch the NFL in the playoffs, and I've watched them down the regular season here, because defenses are so good and corners are so good. So much of the stuff in the NFL is there's not a ton of guy goes and sits down in his zone and waits for the ball there. I mean, a lot of the stuff is a lot of the throws to receivers. The receivers are moving horizontal to the line of scrimmage, or they're moving away from the line of scrimmage. You don't see a lot of comeback, right? You don't see a lot of comeback routes. You don't see a lot of, you know, just kind of squatting down at the stick routes because defenses are so good. I think that's a little bit of what Chip Kelly brought to Ohio State in the playoffs. Now, why they didn't do it in the Michigan game is, and we'll never know that one, right? That was like, we're going to show you we're big bad Ohio State. We're going to bully you. Whereas they were at their best throwing a quick out to Smith on the move, or a crosser to him on the move, and then it freed up other guys, or it was the other two receivers on the move that they got the ball to. He played the space game in the playoff run very well. I think Josh Heupel's got to look at that offensively, and then conversely, I think Tim Banks has to figure out how to defend the space game at the second level better than they did against teams that really tried to exploit that, like Arkansas and certainly like Ohio State did.
I think that's fair. Which guys do you think have you circled that have to have the biggest spring for Tennessee?
I think with the injury to Jamad McCoy, I think Jalen McMurray has to have a really big spring at corner. And I think they've got to find some depth behind him there. I think Boo Carter's got to continue to come on, but who's the depth piece behind him? You know, Edwin Spillman, you mentioned, got all the talent in the world. He's a guy who needs all the work he can get this spring. I think Caleb Herring needs another good spring because now instead of being necessarily the third guy or the fourth guy, he's going to probably be the second guy behind Joshua Joseph. So I think this is really big for him. Where's Jordan Ross? You know, what does that look like? I think it's a big spring for him because there's certainly opportunities there. Marion Dye, I'm looking for pass rushers, you know, who can get home and really cause some havoc off the edge. And then offensively, you know, again, I've said this on multiple Volquest podcasts. I equate David Sanders to being a first-round draft pick because of what you've invested in getting him here. So he's got to play. Nobody outside of a quarterback, nobody in the NFL, and really at the quarterback position, very rarely anymore do you set a rookie. You know, you go play that guy. So he's got to learn on the fly. So this spring's really big for him. I think it's a big spring for Lance Hurd. I mean, he's got to be better. I mean, I'm not trying to pick on him, but he just wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
He's got to be much better than he was a season ago. And then where are they at the center position? You know, and at receiver, what all these young guys look like. You know, where's Chris Brazzell in year two? We have this notion out there that everybody's better in year two in this system at the receiver position. Does he really make that kind of step? And we have evidence of that, right? Because what Jalen Hyatt did and what Dante Thornton did from year one to year two. Even Brew McCoy, before he got hurt, was a different player in year two than he was in year one. So there's evidence of that being the case. So who in that receiver group takes that year two step? Is that Braylon Staley? Is it Mike Matthews? Is it Chris Brazzell? It needs to be all three.
Yeah.
Is really what it needs to be. So what do they look like there? This is a fascinating spring because this is not the veteran-laden team that you kind of just hope nobody gets hurt, put them all in bubble wrap, and we'll see you the week going to Atlanta to take on Syracuse, which in a lot of cases, that's where you were in a lot of spots, particularly in the line of scrimmage on the defensive line. You know, you don't want Cooper Mays to get hurt. You want to be careful about some things. That's not really where this team is right now. This is you probably need to get down and dirty pretty good in spring practice, because those young linebackers need plenty of work and get tested. Receivers we just mentioned, and you're going to be playing a new combination of offensive linemen, whether there's all 4 of them are transfers and a freshman, or 3 are transfers and a freshman, whatever that looks like. It's going to be new. It's not going to be the same kind of trio of guys that have played together for 2 or 3, 4 years out there. So to me, this is going to have to be a more physical spring than maybe it was last year with a veteran team.
It better not be 4 transfers on the offensive line. You're not winning a national title. Like, just go through the teams who are in it. Like, they're not. You don't have 4 transfers. You just don't.
Look at this. I mean, Lance Hurd's a transfer, second year, but he's a transfer. Yeah. If Andre Carrick gets his appeal, and I don't know that he will, but if he gets his appeal, there's a transfer. Okay. You just signed Wendell Moy. That's a transfer. Yeah. The kid from Notre Dame, there's a transfer.
Yeah.
I mean, that's 4. David Sanders is a freshman's 5. I mean, like, it's not out of the realm of possibility that is what it is. Now, they're not all
I agree with you.
Transfers.
Yeah.
Some of them are second-year transfers. But I want to see some of those young offensive linemen.
Yes.
They've talked about them. Let's see what they can do. But that's where I am with them. We'll see what Glenn Ellerby is with them when they get to August, and we try to figure out who the 5 are that you're trying to mesh together and go from there.
I would throw in the hat too on the defensive line. It's actually a strong side defensive end, because I think when you talk about there was a little bit of a step back on the defensive line from last year to 2 years ago. I think Tyler Barron was extremely productive on that end. And I think they missed Barron. That was like an under talked about part of last year, was like, I like Dominic Bailey. He's just not a game wrecker. Like, you saw Barron in that Florida game for Miami. Like, it's just, I understand, like, there's other stuff, but on the football field, Tyler Barron is a really good strong side defensive end. Tyler Barron is really good on third downs, and him and James Pierce is a combination that a lot of people did not like coming their way 2 years ago on either side. And I think this year they have an opportunity. Bailey will be back, but I mean, Isaiah Campbell is like a late ad who, I mean, he could be a really good player on that end. You have Tyree Weathersby. We'll see what he looks like in the spring. I think he needs to have a big spring, but he's someone that Garner likes a lot. Tyree West has flashed at times. Like, he's had some really good games. I mean, those are a handful of blue chip guys who you brought in behind Bailey. I think they kind of need one of those guys to kind of break through and push Bailey to be like that Tyler Barron type on the opposite end to take some of the pressure off the Leos, because I think they really did miss Barron on that other side. I don't know if you agree, but that's kind of where I was at.
I think they missed Tyler Barron third down and when he slid inside.
Yeah.
I think you go back and look, how many times did he force the quarterback into Pierce's lap, to help him? And conversely, how many times did Pierce force him kind of in there? I mean, the inside pressure that Barron made a year ago, when you had Roman Harrison on outside and you had James Pierce outside and you had Barron inside, his quickness really worked to Tennessee's advantage on the inside. And he helped generate sacks for James Pierce. He helped Pierce have a better year. I do think Pierce missed him. I think Tennessee missed his production. Did they miss all the drama and all those things? I mean, that's whatever. But when you talk about production, I think Tyler Barron had a better year than any of us probably gave him credit for in 23, because I think he did some of the dirty stuff that you didn't see. And I don't mean dirty in a negative connotation. I just mean he created plays for some other people at times that went unnoticed by some people. So, yeah, I do think they miss him. Who's the guy that slides inside that wreaks some havoc? Because I don't feel like they had that. I thought Omar Norman Lott would be a guy there. He was not as consistent as I thought he would be, which was disappointing, because I thought he could really be a pretty high-volume sack guy for an inside guy. And they didn't have a bad year. I don't want to suggest that they did, but the expectation for them was to be a dominating force. And I don't know that they dominated the way a lot of us thought they would dominate throughout the season. And I don't think they played their best football late in the year.
Which offensive player the Vols need to become a star in 2025 are you most confident right now here on January 30th, Will, in 25, Brent?
That needs to be – who needs to become a star?
Like who among the group on offense?
It's got to be a wide receiver.
Who is there one who you are most confident on January 30th?
I mean, I'm excited. I'm excited about Braylon Staley because I like him in the slot. I think he can do things in the slot that can be pretty fun to watch potentially. And we know the slot position can get a lot of balls thrown their way in this offense. So I'm very fascinated and very interested to see Braylon Staley. I like his competitive makeup. I think Mike Matthews has all the talent in the world. It's about Mike Matthews' sense of urgency all the time. And then are they really going to do anything with Boo Carter? I mean, I don't know. They need somebody that they can throw the ball to 5 yards, and 5 yards can become 30 yards. 5 yards can become, I mean, they need, if teams are not going to give you the over-the-top stuff to where the Jalen Hyatt plays where a guy's, 10 yards behind everybody, then you need a Velus Jones type guy. You need a guy that you can throw the ball to 5 yards downfield, and next thing you know, you look up, he's gained 15 yards. They didn't have enough yards after contact. They didn't have enough broken tackles. They didn't have enough make a guy miss and it turns a 5-yard hitch or it turns a 5-yard slant into a 20-yard gain. A shallow cross turns into a big gain, that type of thing. It felt like they kind of got whatever they threw the ball. The ball went 12 yards in the air, they got 12 yards. If it went 5 yards in the air, they got 5 yards. That's more what this team felt like this past year. So I think they need a guy out there who that Nico can throw the ball to and can make something happen. Now, maybe that's a back out of the backfield. I don't know. That's not what they've done in this offense. I don't know what the counter to finding that is, but they've got to find a space guy who can turn 5 into 15. They didn't have enough of that last year.
I mean, maybe it's the one who's kind of forgotten that I thought was just he just seemed like an obvious portal guy, and he's back, is Ethan Davis, where super talented kid, where he's kind of like that hybrid type where you're not sure he's a receiver, you're not sure he's tight end, like that Chase Claypool type deal where you're like, I don't know what you are, but I do know like you're someone who theoretically should be good in the red zone. You're theoretically somebody who could be a problem over the middle of the field. That could be a mismatch, kind of the way Georgia uses Oscar Delp or guys like that. Like there is a lot of theoretical intrigue to Ethan Davis. And I just kind of wonder if it's just like, I understand the blocking aspect and being more physical, but like, is he someone you have to find a way to utilize him more because he is such an intriguing mismatch on the outside in the slot? Like, is he an option in the slot that could give teams fits? Because they're like, I don't know what to do with this guy.
Well, here's a big picture thing, not specific to Ethan, but talking about him, you're talking about him kind of brings this to mind for me a little bit. They're not going as fast as they've gone in the past. Okay. And part of that is some of the rule changes that prevent some of that. The faking of injuries kind of prevents some of that. If you go out of bounds, within the box on your sideline, which is a 40-yard box, whether you sub or not, you can't go fast. So there's some rules in place that are trying to slow teams down. I think it slowed down Tennessee a little bit. Some of it's by Tennessee's choice that they've slowed down. Some of it's their lack of execution on early downs prevents them from going fast. But I say all that for this. If you're not going fast and you're going to sub, do you package more plays for personnel than what you've done in the past? Because what you've done in the past is this is what we run regardless of what personnel is on the field. Okay, we're just going to go because we're going so fast. But now if that's the case, do you say, well, we've got some things we want to get to with this personnel grouping. We're not going fast, so we're going to play this personnel group. Okay, so we've got some package plays for an Ethan Davis that doesn't force him to do something that he's not equipped to do if he's not a blocker. I mean, I think Ethan Davis has to be much more consistent, period. But if you're going to play freshman receivers, they probably can't handle everything. So how do you package it different? If you're going to play Boo Carter on offense, you're not going to give Boo Carter the whole playbook, and he's going to have every route adjustment, sight adjustment out there. You're probably going to say, hey, these are the 4 or 5 plays we're going to run for you, okay? And so you're going to package stuff. They haven't really done that under Josh Heupel because of the tempo. But if you're not playing at tempo, do you do that? And does that give you a little more versatility in use of your personnel and use of your play calling as well? I don't know. That's an off-season discussion, an off-season topic for Josh Heupel and his offensive staff as they try to look at ways to counter what defenses are doing to them and counter the ways that their offense is being slowed down right now.
And they have to be careful with Boo Carter, I think, because star is an extremely important position on this defense. And he got better as season went on. And Jordan Thomas, we'll see where he's at, but Christian Harrison's gone. I don't know. Is that like
they got to find a star?
Yeah,
they have to find a backup star to Boo Carter. 100%.
And if you're going to play him both ways a little bit, like you absolutely, because he's playing more snaps and more snaps. More opportunity to get injured. Like and he's returning punts. Like Boo Carter is going to be on the field a lot. And
well, he wants to be Travis Hunter.
That's great.
That's the way he wants to play, and he's going to point to that. And listen, do you want to keep him around? And you're probably going to have to figure out some ways to play him, offensively and everything like that. To your point, though, yes, you've got to have some depth around him. You've got to have depth behind him. Because no offense to Travis Hunter, who I think is a terrific player, playing at corner, he didn't play downhill and run support. Mm-hmm. He didn't play as physical defensively as Boo Carter plays defensively, which probably reduces his injury factor a little bit. Mm-hmm. They also, how they threw him the ball, was a lot of vertical stuff, and he was terrific at it. But they didn't throw a lot of underneath tunnels where he could get blown up by a linebacker. Mm-hmm. They were kind of protective a little bit of Travis Hunter from some of the physicality when playing that many snaps. Again, I think he's a terrific player. I'm not saying he couldn't handle that, but if you're going to play a guy 150 snaps a game, you got to be mindful of it. Mm-hmm. Okay. At the same time, too, you got to be more dynamic.
Yeah.
So, it's the same thing with running Nico, right? It's the same thing. Like, well, we don't want him to get hurt. Okay. Well, legs are a part of this offense at the quarterback position. Nico's a better quarterback when he's using his legs. Okay. I think he's more effective. He's a better player. So you're going to have to call some stuff for him. Now, he's going to have to learn to slide, don't take hits, get down and protect yourself better. But you can't take that element away to protect him because it limits some of your offense. The same way I think you have to be careful not to be overprotective for Boo Carter, because one, you're looking for somebody to make a play on offense for you.
Yeah.
He's really good with the ball in his hand in space. We've seen that. So I'm not saying he plays 40 snaps of offense in any given game, but if you're going to play him out there, you just roll the dice, take a risk and see what happens. That's the game. Now, you better have a backup to him. You better have an answer. You also better have an answer if he comes to you in the swamp and it's 112 degrees outside and you've played him a bunch of snaps and he's gassed and can't go. So you got to find a backup nickel. I don't know who that is right now. I don't know where Jordan Thomas is. I'm not optimistic. He's not going to go through spring. I don't know where he's going to be at the start of the season. That was a significant injury he suffered a year ago. I don't know that he's back within a year. So where are you at with the star position? Who are your options there?
Caleb Beasley, maybe?
I don't know. Does Beasley play there? That's a great question. I think when you talk about questions you have to find answers to in the spring, I think you got to find a fourth corner or a third corner, okay, who may eventually become your fourth corner when McCoy's back, whenever that happens. But you got to find another corner. You got to find a second star position. Yeah. You got to get more confident in a guy like John Slaughter, some people at the safety spot in the back end of that secondary. That's just – you have to answer some of those questions this spring, or at least really get a firm grip on what direction you're going with an answer for those positions this spring.
I think there's a lot of reason for optimism there. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if one of the freshmen settles in as a nickel guy, whether it's Dylan Lewis, Tyler Redmond, or Trey Poteet, one of those guys, as a third corner. That wouldn't surprise me. I think where they're at right now with Ricky Gibson and company, like, they play a bunch of snaps. That's the other part of it. Is like Willie Martinez, if Jermon's not ready to go right away, guess what? McMurray and Ricky Gibson are going to play like 70 snaps. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't think that's as pressing to me as it might be to some folks, because I'm just like, y'all got to look at the snap count, because those two are going to play an absolute insane amount of snaps. Like, Willie does not rotate much there. I will say on the back end, like, I think you have an opportunity to upgrade Edrees Farooq potentially over Will Brooks. I think that's a possibility. And then at star, we'll see if Caleb Beasley is there, but I think they do 100% have. I think it's more pressing than corner or safety is finding the backup to Boo, because he's just going to, the writing is on the wall that he's going to have to do. He's going to be involved a whole lot more in 2025 that you've got to have some precautions in place.
Yeah, I think Farooq's a big factor in this thing too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really do. I think he's a guy that they really need him. He needs to continue to take a step, but I think they love everything about him. So I think this is a guy that I think he will be a guy you hear a lot about as spring winds down, about where they think they are with him, because I think they're really high on him.
Final thing for you, Brent, and we'll get you out of here. I'm very curious how you answer this. Most likely out of the three. I have this just for you.
All right.
You got to rank this 1 through 3, Brent.
Oh, I love these questions. Go ahead.
I know you do. I saved the percentages for Austin Price. We're not doing percentages here.
Okay.
Out of the three, I need you to rank these in terms of most likely in 2025 for the Tennessee football team. Nico in New York for the Heisman ceremony. David Sanders Jr. and Lance Hurd grade well all season long at PFF at both tackle spots. And Mike Matthews and one of Chris Brazzell, Braylon Staley, Boo Carter have a Cedric Tillman, Jalen Hyatt type season in this offense. 1 to 3 and most likely. 1 being the highest and most likely for you.
I don't know what PFF grades mean.
It doesn't have to be PFF, just that you see in your eyes every week that they were good all season long.
Good. I don't know what good means. I don't know what your definition of good. It's a very
that they're not in 12 personnel all SEC play because they don't trust their tackles.
I think they're not going to be Oklahoma all season long. It's not going to be the Oklahoma game all season long. So whatever that makes that.
That's a step up, man. That's 3 receivers on the field more likely.
One of those guys having a 1,000-yard season is what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
That's because I don't know that we're going to see a Biletnikoff. We're not going to see a Jalen Hyatt type season.
Yeah,
and we're not going to see a guy average 28 yards a catch, whatever the stupid number was we had at that point. So I don't want to ever say somebody's going to have a Jalen Hyatt year, because I think that one's A, I don't think teams are going to let you do that, and B, I think that was just a stupid year of just crazy numbers. So, man, I haven't thought about New York in terms of who all could be there and in terms of who's coming back. I mean, Sellers, Lagway just in this league, young guys. I'll go tackles being better, 1.
Interesting.
I'll go receiver having I'll probably go receiver 2 and then Nico 3 for lack of knowledge on Nico. I don't think you can do if you don't do 1 or 2, then I don't think Nico can get to New York. So that's probably why I also don't put him 1. Because if he gets to New York, that means you're a lot better at tackle.
Yes.
Because you protected better. And if he gets to New York, that means he's putting up numbers, which means you've got receivers who are having breakouts.
Mm-hmm.
So does that make sense on why I've got? I'm not saying Nico can't make New York. I just don't think he can make New York without 1 and 2 happening.
Mm-hmm.
Fair.
I think that's fair. And I think the most pressing is 1. What you have is 1. If Sanders and Hurd are both good and they're healthy and they're able to just roll for a full season, I think that that helps. That raises the floor of the offense significantly and gives some breathing room to this offense.
Here's my rationale for 1.
Yeah.
1, I think David Sanders is a highly competitive kid.
Mm-hmm.
I do. I don't think he is going to sit back and sort of be fat and happy that he's arrived because he was a 5-star and he got NIL money to come, all those things. I think he's super, super talented. And I think he's a driven guy. On the other side, I don't know that Lance Hurd naturally is the most driven guy, but it's also a contract year. So he's NFL eligible at the end of this season. So I'm sure his agent and people are talking about, hey, man, 12 great games out of you, 12 high-quality games out of you. Give me 6 great months, if you will, then you're gonna cash. You're gonna get even more cash than you've been making.
Yeah.
So I think a little bit of a contract year for Hurd, competitiveness out of David Sanders, kind of gets that going. I think with the receivers, what is the counter to how defenses are going to play you? Without knowing that one, I'm a little bit gun shy on a breakout receiver because I don't know what Tennessee's counter is to some of the stuff that they have seen in terms of limiting some of that vertical big play type stuff. Now the question is, does Nico develop enough rapport with a receiver like Hendon had with Cedric that first year where he just threw jump balls? Just he was covered, but I'm throwing him the ball anyway. Does one of those guys become that? I mean, I don't know. I mean,
Mike had that in the Kent State game. Like, I think he may have had the best touchdown catch outside of Brazel's.
Yeah, he did. I mean, does he become a guy where you're like, all right, he's gonna have 9 catches a game because I'm just gonna throw it to him covered. I'm gonna throw it to him when he's covered. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, maybe he and Nico develop that kind of rapport. Maybe that's where they get to. I don't know. That's gonna be.
Well, it's also frustrating because it's like I think the closest just if you measurements for Cedric is Travis Smith. Travis Smith's a boundary receiver. Like, he's huge. Like, Travis Smith is the one who could, like, if you're trying to figure out who's a blue chip type guy that they brought in of this young group who could actually fill that role eventually, I feel like it's Smith. He's the most throw it up guy that they have in the roster. He's a true freshman.
Yeah. What's the development there though? I mean, how quick do you get? I mean, again, you're sitting here we're talking about guys in year 2.
Yeah.
Tillman was the only one who wasn't a year 2 guy. He put up big numbers in year 1. And again, they just threw him a lot of jump balls. You know, I don't know that he ran, quote, the offense in terms of all the choice routes and everything that you had to do. It was just, hey man, we got to figure out a way to make a first down. Let's throw him a jump ball and see if he can go get it. And he could. That was his strength and what he did at Tennessee. So with the receivers, it's about development. What do they look like? How quickly does Kelsey Pope get a freshman ready? And how much better are these guys who played sparingly in year 1? How much better are they in year 2? Brazel's a guy who made me look foolish because I thought he was going to have a big year. He was really productive at Tulane. It didn't translate the way I anticipated it translating here. Does it translate in year 2 or no? I think that's a big question mark, which has me hesitant about declaring that group or somebody in that group really exploding right now.
All-time weird year. He goes off against the bye games. He has the best catch of the year, most important maybe, in the Alabama game, and then complete no-shows in the biggest one. Like, it's just, he had a really, really weird year.
I don't know I don't know his mentality. I don't know his makeup. I don't know his drive. I don't know enough about, I don't know enough about him. I don't know what you got to do to pull it out of him type stuff.
But he has the look of someone who should be really good in this.
Oh offense. Yeah, I mean, listen, he looks like a slot receiver. Yeah. He run in practice. He can run routes like a slot receiver, but he's big enough to play as an outside dude. And it just didn't translate this past year. Does contract year for him? Does it translate differently? I don't know. Does contract years mean as much as they did before? Because guys are making money now. Used to, that third year was like, hey, this guy's going to show out, right? And it's contract year. He's going to go get rich type deal. Going to be on his P's and Q's, do everything the right way. Yeah, I mean, those guys are making a lot of money now. Does that really matter to them as much? That's just part of the fascinating elements to college football, among many fascinating elements of where the game is at right now and where it potentially could be going.
I also just don't think Nico can get to New York to put a bow on everything, Brent, is now that you have 2 scholarship quarterbacks behind him. Like, I think part of last year, it's like, I like Gaston more, but you did have a situation where you're like, we're just trying to survive and like bring him along, redshirt freshman, super young. You've got a walk-on behind him, and then a true freshman, obviously, and Jake Merklinger as a scholarship kid. You have 2 options now. Jake's been in the system now for 2 years. He's scholarship. George McIntyre scholarship. You got to run Nico. There's just no way around it. Down the stretch, like, he has to run.
I just don't think you can be as effective offense. No. With him if you're not in a true RPO world.
Yes. You got to take the risk of him getting injured. You just have to.
I mean, now he's got to protect himself. He's got to learn to be smart, but But he's got to they have got to be in a situation where they look at it and they turn 2nd and 10 into 3rd and 4, 3rd and 3, simply based off a run where he slides down.
Yes.
As opposed to 2nd and 10 becoming 3rd and 14 on a sack, or 3rd and 14 or 3rd and 10 on a throwaway. Like that just has to be a part.
Yeah.
It just has to be a part of what they do, and you just have to ride with it. And if something happens, it's unfortunate, but you just have to be at your best. I think he's going to have to be involved with. His legs are going to have to be a much bigger factor than they were this past season, where you were obviously very protective of that.
Yeah. The training wheels have to come off. Like it's go time. It's a contract year for Nico. I mean, this is a gigantic NFL, and if it's kind of awkward this year and it's okay, why would he stick around for year 3 with so much coming in? Like if it's okay again, like what? Like clearly something's not right after 3 years in the system, and he still isn't putting up elite kind of.
You got the financial factors of all that too. I mean, you just never know. I mean, again, he's got to play better, and to be where you want to be, he's going to have to play well, and you got to play to his strengths. And I think his mobility has to be a part of that strength.
Brent Hubbs, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Volquest.com this week?
Well, we got tons of coverage. Basketball, obviously, a huge game against Florida. I mean, that's not one that basketball needs to drop another home game. So we got coverage of that. We've got our mailbag podcast stuff. Our regular podcasts are up. We got plenty of recruiting coverage coming out of Tennessee's recent junior day. Some stuff on facilities. All those types of things are at Volquest. So we got a lot going on. Great discussion right now about a lot of different topics. A lot of talk about GMs, and what you're supposed to do there. You're not supposed to have a GM.
Have you put your name in the hat officially or no?
If they want to pay me a large sum of money to go over there and really not have just to have a title and not really make critical decisions, yeah, sure. I would consider that. I would listen to that, but no, they haven't. They're not going to. I think that whole deal is pretty fascinating on nobody knows what a college GM is. It sounds good. He's the general manager, but what does that mean? And I think that's what we're all trying to figure out and trying to discover in college football is what kind of power does a GM truly have? And is he got enough power to justify the salaries we're seeing for that position right now?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like way more in my guess is it's a lot more valuable at Ole Miss than it is at Texas, because Ole Miss, when you're living in the portal and you're trying to identify and make sure you can keep this thing humming year over year, you got to have someone who's watching a lot of tape and organizing and know how to attack.
I don't think that has to be a GM. I think that's what your recruiting office is doing.
Yeah.
If I'm running a recruiting office and I'm overseeing a recruiting office, whoever's in my back room, that's, I got a group of guys that are watching high school tape, and then I got a guy or two back there, and all they're doing is watching. When you hear rumblings of somebody potentially maybe going into portal, I'm watching all their cut ups and all their tape there. I don't know that that's a $700,000 position to find those guys. You know what I'm saying? Now, I agree that you can't be late. You got to have them evaluated oftentimes before they ever go in. But there's so much behind the scenes chatter going on. I don't know how a guy who's making large sums of money gives you, quote, an advantage in that regard. I think you have to be organized, and I think your recruiting staff has to be organized with it. But I don't know that it requires this grand poobah deal. I mean, I think the question I have with GMs is what decisions.
Yeah.
What decision are they going into the head coach going, hey, we're not paying that guy. We're going to cut him. I know he's a veteran. I know he started 3 years, but he's asking for way too much money. We're cutting him. We don't have that. Okay. So I'm just telling you, you're not going to have him on your roster. And when the position coach says, hey, I need 3 of these guys out of the portal, and you go, no, you've got 7 of them or 8 of them or however many in your position room now that's not played, you're going to play them.
They're making good money that we brought in, that you evaluated.
You're going to play them. And a head coach who's made all those decisions all of his life as a college head coach is going to turn to somebody and say, okay, I'm going to do what you say because you're dictating that to me. The hierarchy in the NFL is so different from the GM standpoint.
Yeah.
I mean, is a college GM going to be able to fire a college coach? Because they can in the NFL. So they have superseding power over the coaching staff.
Yeah.
With the way it seems right now, you're not going to put a GM in a position that he has power over the head coach. I mean, is he going to walk into the head coach and say, hey, here's what we're doing. Season's over. We are removing the following 3 staff members. We're not retaining these 3 staff members. So we're going to go out and find you 3 new assistant coaches on that side of the ball. I don't know. I don't know if that's my vision of a GM, and I don't know that translates to college. Now,
I just think it's going to be flipped like you saw Belichick and Lombardi at UNC, where the coach brings in his GM or some kind of player, personnel guy that he trusts, that he knows what he wants, and just, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's just going to be flipped.
Right. So, my thing is, maybe the GM role in college is vastly different than what I have in my head a general manager does. And if it is, then we're going to see more general managers. But what decisions are they really making at the college level? I think that's what we're all trying to figure out. I mean, there's been a guy with a GM title in college football since like 2015 or 2016, but nobody like it. It wasn't a thing. But now
the Ole Miss or LSU guy.
Yeah, now it's a thing, right? So now it's like this, like Texas Tech lost their GM. Is that a critical loss in Lubbock? I don't know. I haven't followed Texas Tech. They didn't have the most loaded roster in the country.
They were strong in the portal this cycle, and I think he's getting a lot of credit for they were like top 3 in transfer rankings this cycle.
I mean, then call them the head of portal acquisition. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if that's their job. I don't know that's quote general managing the entire. I mean,
it's kind of like that player personnel, like it's a literal player personnel. Like it's just dealing with players, and like maybe it's part of negotiations. Are they good with talking to players and keeping some guys in to retain that the coach wants to retain, but doesn't have the personality to retain these guys?
And maybe that's what the job is, and it's not the hiring, firing, and making every roster decision for your head coach.
Can you relate to this 20-year-old who's trying to get out of here, like that we really need, that I don't know how to talk to right now?
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. And then again, that discussion's been on the board for the last couple of weeks and will continue to be there, I'm sure. So because that's an off-season topic. There's several other off-season topics brewing. This 5th year thing, it doesn't sound like that's close. Probably not going to have any kind of impact on basketball kids for next year. It doesn't sound like right now, but what happened? Are we going to get a house settlement in April? Is Congress going to step in with NIL in any way now? I don't know. I mean, there's some big off-season type topics. Are we going to eliminate one of the transfer portal windows? How are you going to manage the portal life? All those things are going to be fascinating topics of discussion, and amongst the fact that the Big Ten and the SEC seem to secretly have their random water buffalo, meetings that nobody else is invited to try to dictate what they want to do in college football moving forward.
It's like the Naked Gun movie where he's like, nothing to see here, where the fireworks are going off behind him and everything. That's what the SEC and Big Ten meeting together. It's like nothing to see here. Greg Sankey and Patetti.
Kind of what it feels like.
Brent Hubbs, go subscribe, Volquest.com today if you're not already. What are you doing? If you're listening to this program, you're probably subscribed. But if not, go subscribe to the best Tennessee Vols sports coverage each and every day, Volquest.com. Brent, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
All right, sounds good, Chase.
Nicely done, nephew. The Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.